Welcome to Lit Happens, Unpacking Senior English. I'm Adriel.
And I'm Belle.
We're experienced English teachers dedicated to supporting both new and experienced educators in a world in which we are often time poor, to empower our students to excel in their English studies.
If you're an English teacher, like us, navigating this curriculum, then this podcast is designed with you in mind. And our mission really is to break down the complexities by unpacking English nationally.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 40 of Lit Happens, Reading to Write Reloaded, taking you through the new syllabus version of our Reading to Write Year 11 unit. As always, big welcome to Adriel for another episode. Hi, Adriel. How are you?
Hey, good. Thanks, Belle. Good. Thanks. Looking forward to another episode 40 of just some discourse, I guess, regarding the new Reading to Write syllabus.
Yeah.
Will be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in light of that, I'm going to go straight into our lit or quit because it's very relevant for the new syllabus. So our lit or quit for today, everybody, is new HSC content points. Are they lit or are they quit? What are your thoughts on this one, Adriel?
Yeah, I think we discussed this at the end of last week, not on air, but afterwards. We definitely do, I think, agree on this, that they are quite lit in the sense that it's just so much easier to follow now. There is just a lot more direction that Nessa has provided us and gives our teachers, ourselves, a lot more direction when it comes to planning. So I 100% think that the new content points are lit. It's no longer sort of finding that sort of, what is it that this syllabus is asking us of, or it doesn't have that very open-ended nature to it. Still, like, some of the content points do allow for that, but it's just structured in a way that's far easier to follow now. So I definitely think that these new HSC content points, Nessa is doing something right here. So it does help us out. It helps save time, and hopefully we'll be able to unpack that a little bit further as we go through today's ep.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they're so much more streamlined than they used to be. They were very open to interpretation. And I think you're right. There is still an element of these content points where you are still able to put your own flair, but it's just so much more like prescriptive in a way that everybody's on the same playing field.
Yeah.
And I think I really like how they've divided them into understanding and responding, because it's very easy to match them up with skills, like, and your textual concepts. And even they've used the wording of some of those within. So I love them. I know we have some content and videos coming out about how you can align those content points into creating weekly phases and like a bit of a unit overview and scope and sequence. So we're gonna get you some resources in that, guys, so you can see how it works, but so much more aligned. I mean, I'd say the only thing that might make people think quit is having to do them again, because you are going to have to, like, even with reading to write, yes, you've got reading to write, but there will be some changes that need to be, I wouldn't say that they're huge changes, but maybe just some different specifications that are going to align much more deeply with the specific content points. So while you can definitely use what you've been doing in the old syllabus for reading to write, you will have to do like a new and improved version where you actually make some slight modifications to hit those new outcomes and content points, because they're obviously tied together. But yeah, I think it's lit. I think it's the most directive I think I've ever seen in terms of a HSC syllabus.
It's not easy. Like, as much as we say we have to do them again, it's just it's a lot easier to follow, and I think it'll make life a lot easier for teachers. So props on Nessa. I know we generally have a very interesting relationship with them at times as teachers, but look, they are trying to help here, and I definitely think it is of benefit to us in guiding us. So yeah, it's definitely lit.
Totally. I think they've done well. So we might get into then our first question. I was also thinking about how they've simplified the rubrics a little bit too, which I think is really good, because they were quite wordy, and then we'd have to explain to students the rubrics are written, by adults, by a committee, by teachers, and often the onus was on us to sort of simplify it for our students. But I think that that's come in a bit more naturally now that they've simplified it. So props to them. I think they've done a really good job. This kind of goes into our first sort of question is, what makes the reading to write syllabus and rubric important for year 11 students? So we might just talk a bit of like an overview of what the new version, the new 2.0 is like, and then our thoughts, experiences, strategies.
Yeah, no, sounds good. So the reading to write unit, again, is a stepping stone, I would say, for your exploration of different types of texts. So we're looking at like a diverse range of texts in this unit, which range from your prose, your poetry, could be multimodal. Again, that dreaded word there for a lot of teachers, but it's basically looking at how these diverse texts actually use things like, you know, their language, their structure, to convey some of these complex ideas. And we'll generally associate that with a common module type concept. So, you know, I often say with these common module type concepts, it's pertaining to a lot of things to do with humanity. So if it's an emotion, if it's a complex thought to do with something that human beings will face, generally you'll have your students on the right track. But what we see with this unit, it's in the title itself, reading to write. We know that reading is an essential skill for everybody. It's something that not only benefits, you know, our young kids, students in year 11, year 12, but also benefits adults as well. And we'll often say this, I mean, the proof is in the pudding when we actually talk about things like for students to improve their essay writing, for example, we'll say, go expose yourself to good scholarly essays, university level one, so you can actually get an understanding of how people write properly, how people express their ideas, how they develop their written expression. So I think as teachers, we can use this reading to write module here to actually build the framework for written expression and good literary written expression for students moving forward. So yeah, it's a basic sort of overview there where you're exposing kids and students to multiple range of texts in order to get them writing and thinking about how meaning and language is used effectively. How language is effectively to convey meaning in these diverse array of mediums.
Yeah, perfect. I think it's the perfect module to begin with because it's such an open template to looking at all the text types that students are going to be, you know, referring to, and also it's also the perfect unit to assess where your year 11s are at, because I know quite often the students that you get in year 11 are not the ones you've been teaching in junior years. You know, especially depending on what course you're in, what combination you have. So I think it's really nice that you can embed some activities here to kind of assess where they are at, and then you know what text types of skills you need to spend more time on. So I've always really liked the reading to write unit. I remember when it first came out in the previous prescriptions, how excited some teachers were about it. I think there's a lot of leeway. That can maybe feel a bit daunting, but as we said, that now that there's specific content points, I think it's going to take a little bit of pressure off there's almost too much we can teach them in this unit. It's going to give a lot more guidance. Yeah. Okay, we might get into question two. Yeah, sorry. Did you have anything else to that one? Should we move on to the next?
Yeah, I'll just quickly go over just a few little things for our teachers. You are going to have students that will come into year 11 with generally a big gap. I often say it's a big gap between stage 5 and stage 6 in most school settings. So some schools will do this right, and it's not generally the school's fault. It's students' level of maturity will develop a lot more as they take that jump from year 10 to 11. So I think taking the time in the reading to write unit to really establish what is required in terms of writing, expression, the standard of writing expected for the HSC in the reading to write unit. If you can develop that nice and early as the students start off their year 11 unit, I think it's going to be of great benefit to you come later on, as they start the year 12 unit in term 4 that year, because you have established those skills. You've probably bridged the gap that, you know, they're missing a lot of those gaps in their learning when it comes to their writing. I think if you can frame lots of writing in the reading to write unit, exposing kids to a variety of texts, not just one simple
Yeah.
prescribed text.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's very, very important. And also, I know we don't do this, and I probably haven't done this enough in the past, but getting kids to look at scholarly essays as well during this time,
Mm.
along with prose, poetry, film, whatever it may be. I'd avoid, me personally speaking, a long film, like something that will take you a few lessons, because we know we are quite time constricted in the school setting with all the events that go on in a 10-week term for generally this first unit, which I think, can constrict our teachers. A short film might suffice, just so they can get exposed to those techniques in terms of the visual form.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, use this opportunity to really establish those basic foundational skills, so that you're not chasing your tail come, the critical study or the close study of literature, depending on advanced or standard, whatever you're doing, um, come term 2 or 3 later on in that year. At least you're establishing those skills nice and early. Kids sort of think of this as a little bit of a honeymoon transition 10-week period, but really
Mm.
get the ball rolling right from the beginning. Expose them to the tough stuff, because it will get them really thinking about, okay, this is what I need to be doing in stage 6, as opposed to how I've cruised along in stage 4 and 5. I say establish those
Mm.
expectations.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I like what you said about being really thoughtful about your core text. I'm a big fan when I'm programming for Reading to Write to create a medley of texts, a medley of
Mm,
short text. So, some visuals, an article, a short film, a poem, and then perhaps a novella or extracts from a novel, even. If you're doing advanced, you might give them something bigger and more substantial,
yeah.
because there is an aspect in advance where you got to make the students quite aware of the expectations and
Mm,
demands of that course. But I think short, sharp, and sweet in Reading to Write is the way to go, because you are spending a lot of time learning your students here. You're probably spending time, like you said, bridging the gap between what they're kind of missing from their
yeah.
junior years and those skills that are needed. And I just feel like a medley and a combination of related and a core text works so well to be able to either mimic the different text types. They work really well to support rubric understanding and kind of do a bit of a mock short answer.
Yeah.
Mock, because the way that I sometimes think about the Reading to Write, it's a bit like human experience and module C combined. And
Yeah.
if you've got little short text, you'll be able to hit a lot more bases than you would with a big major one and one only. So I think it's just good
Mm,
food for thought.
mm.
That you've got some excellent ideas there. Well, then moving into our next question, Hadriel, how would you teach students then to analyze language and style within texts that are selected for this Reading to Write course?
Yeah. And this is probably a thing that we, again, can do preemptively as teachers. Really get the kids a glossary of mode specific or medium specific techniques to start off your study with. So, for example, if you're studying poetry, make sure they have maybe a blueprint of like 15 or so language and structure techniques to do with that form in particular, so that we are developing an analysis straight away. Also, again, this is key. Don't just assume that kids understand what analysis means. Like, unpack that word.
Yeah.
Um, Go into one of our episodes where we looked at the different verbs here, what sort of distinguishes them, a few episodes ago. So shout out there if you want to listen to a little bit of that. But I think we can't just assume. I know in the pressure of the term, we want to be assuming that kids already know X, Y, and Z, even if it means spending 15, 20 minutes recapping things. I
Yeah.
often have this dreaded thing like, hey guys, what do you think this means? And everyone sort of stares at you with radio silence. And then you ask those guiding questions to unpack things, and slowly but surely, what's in there, but the kids just need to have that refresher. So really spend that time unpacking some of these key verbs, and really get them to understand the glossary. What are those key techniques? What are the key language sort of features and stylistic elements of those particular forms? So that's where I find a glossary would be very
Mm,
important. There are many available
great idea.
online. You
Yeah.
can look at Many we might put one together as well eventually for our teachers, that you guys can, give us a shout out with and show us some love with just by sharing our podcast. That would be cool. But yeah, look, start off with something like that, emphasizing, the use of analyzing these language forms, literary devices, and how they shape meaning. I say when you give glossaries to kids, don't just give them like the meanings, like say, oh, it's all well and good to understand what each technique is, like what a metaphor is. It's a comparative type of figurative language device. It's how can they use it? How is it
Yeah.
used to convey meaning?
What is
And
its
get the kids
impact?
to maybe, get the kids to actually write a sentence out using the metaphor or simile or looking at different devices, and then maybe have an activity or short writing activity where they explain how it functions, the how,
Mhm.
so that we're getting kids to understand what this term analysis means. That's probably my first
Yeah.
thing, that we want kids to really understand. Like if they don't know these basic foundational tools, there's no use actually getting into what do you think this means, because they'll just give you a summary.
Yeah.
Whereas
That's
your
right.
higher order kids, your higher order kids are going to be looking at, the close reading element. So you might do guided readings together as teachers, after you've given them these glossaries. So how do you use these glossaries? You do it together
Yeah.
with a teacher guided example, where you highlight some of the meta language in the respective form. You highlight it. I mean, there's so many devices out there these days. I know some of the Apple schools or people that utilize Apple devices will have iPads where they can annotate, on the screen as they do on their little devices at the time. If you old chalk and talk where you've got like a uh, projector going onto a whiteboard, which I
Yeah.
used to have in my old classroom there, put
Mhm.
the text up on the board and get your texters out, your different colored texters, and then start to write. And then
Yeah.
if you are
I
writing at the same time, your kids do not have an excuse to not be writing. I think that's another thing that you'd have to emphasize with your students, work ethic. I I know for me potentially, if you want to get good at analysis, you have to have your pen in your hand at every moment in the classroom as soon as you enter. You need to be asking those guiding questions like how or why afterwards, at the end of a lesson. We'll get to that in a second, but really
Mhm.
establish that culture where kids are coming into that room with an expectation to learn something new. We used to
Yeah.
have one of our deputy principals, and what was it? Those little wilt statements. What did I learn today? You're like your learning
Mhm.
objective sort of things,
Like the exit slip.
which
Yep.
you can see me. I'm laughing about it because as teachers, are sort of like, why do we have to spend the time? And I think just the way some of it was implemented gets us
Mhm.
thinking critically about it. But I think it's important. They need to have some sense of achievement. What do you want to learn by the end of today? So have some sort of objective. So when you start these sorts of things, it's very, very important for us to consider. But yeah, I think those are probably some of the big things for me. Teaching those close reading skills together at the beginning of a term.
Yeah.
And remember, reading to write. These kids don't read these days. That's going to be the
Yeah.
general consensus. So you need to teach them how do you read things and looking at extracts, looking at parts of texts.
Absolutely. I know I've been guilty of just assuming they know how to close read or assuming they know how to physically annotate, let's say, a copy of a poem.
Yeah,
And, you know, you're better off taking that 15 minutes to go, okay, this is one way we can annotate. I know sometimes what I say,
yeah,
if you get confused by writing all over your page, left side is all your technique identification, right side
mm,
is all your effect, maybe top is your context and purpose, and then at least you've got a like just something. It doesn't have to be that way, but
yeah,
you would be surprised how many of them need that hand holding in the beginning as they are
yeah,
transitioning. And I think another great thing that you mentioned is they're often really quiet in this first term.
yeah,
They're often quiet. They're a little overwhelmed because they know it's like big stakes now with year 11. They're in new
yeah,
classes with students they probably didn't spend much time with last year. And it is going to be a bit hard to just ask them a question and expect engagement. You have to really coax them into engagement. You might even give them part of an answer and encourage them to finish that off and get that kind of ball rolling. But
yeah,
um, I think these strategies are really good. And just one more thing too, I know that sometimes I even spend a lesson when I first get them or if you happen to have transition sessions at the end of year 10, in time for year 11, is actually going through different note-taking styles. Because as you said, it's very important they've got that pen in hand. I make it very clear to my guys, the way that I teach, if you're waiting for me to go, okay, here's the information on the board and I'll give you 15 minutes to write it, that's, sorry guys, but like I don't really teach that way. There are moments, sure, but you have to start learning to dictate, note take, while not just your teacher speaking, but always think about the gems that the students come up with. And sometimes I'll say, that was an excellent point. If I was a student in this room, I would be writing that down. Like, even just because they don't know what they don't know. But if we can teach them these things, show them different note-taking styles, I would actually do a bit of a workshop with them in how I would apply it with the information and lesson I gave. It just gives them that confidence, and then they will learn and find their own strategies. But I think if we just leave them on their own devices and perhaps assume, we might be setting ourselves up for further difficulty down the track. And the reading to write unit is the perfect space to do that, because even when you're going over classroom and note-taking skills, you're still reflecting the principles of the reading to write unit. It's all about how do you interpret information and then do something with it.
I agree.
No, that was so great. Okay, so then what about in terms of context? So how would we help students, Adriel, in this unit understand the pivotal role of context in shaping text and shaping the meaning within text?
I think context is so important with a lot of different things, and because you're going to be exposing them to a diverse range of texts, they're going to be looking at all different styles. They're going to be looking at different writing styles, text from different time periods. I know an example of this might be, I'm currently doing a paper on leadership principles for one of the studies that I'm doing part-time, in my own time. Goodness me. I need 9 days in a 7-day week, I think, to get half the stuff done these days. But an interesting thing that was put forth by one of the tutors was, for example, if we're looking at different leadership styles, we want to be looking at contemporary readings and scholarly articles, because if you're to look at something from, say, the 80s and even early 90s, a lot of those critical readings will not have anything to do with the role of technology influencing leadership principles and skills these days. So what I'm trying to say here is context is very, very important in actually getting to understand what is being said, the meaning that is in a text, but also shapes your understanding as a reader as well. And I guess how do we help students to understand the role of context and shaping text? Get them to look at the way context can influence something. So you might do like a piece where I know this is very tough. When you might look at, there's some really good websites out there actually that look at, like, say, articles, and we can look at like the political spectrum, for example, as a tool to help kids understand context, where some issue, let's say in society, a contemporary issue might be presented in a text, let's say gender roles, all right, and you might look at gender roles in the 1800s compared to something in the 1600s. However, you might not tell the kids, which text comes during which time. But after reading the respective, say, articles or text or whatever it might be and comparing them, you might ask the kids, okay, what are each of the texts actually stating about gender roles as the key concept or idea? And how has it been shaped? And that's when kids will be like, oh, this one might have been written in like a time where, let's say, men had more rights than women, or the scale of roles and responsibilities was very different. And then you get to ask the question, so okay, why then? What is the historical background? What are some of those influences during that time historically that shaped this idea? And you really need to make it visual for the kids. I think that's very important, and this is very, very significant when it comes to our shaping of how and why meaning is represented in text. So context is significant. It's very, very significant. It's very important. And if we don't get our kids thinking about context right from the beginning, especially with these diverse range of texts that they're exposed to, we are doing them a disservice. And I think it's something that you need to look to write into your programs, really spending
Yeah,
that time to contextualize texts and ideas. Because I know sometimes we
yeah,
might go straight into reading a text and it'd be like, well, hang
yeah.
on, what is it? I
Where
don't
did
know
that
about
even
you, but I know,
come from? Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Like I often have this process when it comes to a text. The first thing is we look at is the author's context. We look at when the
I'm the
text was
same.
written,
Yeah,
why it was written. Yeah, so I have a series of questions that I'll ask my kids, and we'll spend like 20 minutes just looking it up. And once they have that, they have this, okay, this is why the text is saying this, or it makes making sense of the text a lot easier as well. So it just makes your life easier. Context, context, context.
100%.
I know most
Yeah,
teachers
I
will be
agree.
doing this, but it's also something
Mm,
that helps to shape and contextualize your ideas as well. Like, why do I think a certain way about the ideas being conveyed in the text? So, yeah,
yeah,
it's very important. It encourages that critical evaluation of the text because it gets kids to think about why they think a certain way. Um,
yeah,
and moves them away from those basic descriptions of the text.
true.
They can make that clear link between context and meaning. And once they have that clear link there, then they can start to add that level of nuance, which is more moving towards like those band six responses for, our students moving forward.
Something really great that you just said about being able to introduce the different perspectives through the context. When we think about the new syllabus, remember that it wants us to showcase different perspectives as well. So it
Yeah.
wants diverse perspectives, it wants cultural perspectives, First Nations perspectives, Australian perspectives. So I think Reading to Write is that great opportunity where you can select short texts that maybe even are representative of those different groups, and therefore it's a great way to teach context. And then when your students actually get to the what's the context for the prescribed text, you've kind of already built that muscle within them. And it's
Yeah.
context is huge. It's what helps, when you read an essay that's filled with that contextual understanding, it makes a big difference within the standard cohort. And if you're teaching advanced reading to write, you will know that context is deeply significant. When we get to advanced, we're not just looking at purpose, like the context and how it shapes the purpose of the text, but also students need to be engaging with that within their analysis to make connections to, in advance, how that context is also used and representative of meaning and used as like
Yeah.
representation. And so I think all those strategies, that you have, all those things you've talked about is
Mm.
really, really good. Yeah, really strong for our teachers. Yeah. Okay. All right, we might move into question 4 then. So this is about, I guess we've talked a lot about the reading aspect of the Reading to Write course and all
Yeah.
the engagement and interpretation. And now we might talk about the writing and responding part. So how would we support students in their writing of these various tech types, the persuasive, discursive, imaginative responses within this module here?
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, we've been harping on about this. The purpose of this unit is to expose students to these multiple forms of writing or these different types of um, writing forms, I would say. So I think one of the big things that you want to be looking at is, I know personally I probably have to put something together as well, but really distinguish what persuasive writing is in year 12, what
Yeah.
discursive writing is, what imaginative responses look like. They're the three main forms. I know sometimes we also do look at things like informative writing as well. But
Mm.
let's be
And the
honest, most
reflection.
of it will fall, and the reflective as well, which we sort of haven't added in these units here. Oh, sorry, in this question. But I
Mm.
would have clear, delineated definitions of each of these that I would get the kids to pop at the front of their book or in their notes. I know I've done this recently with my 11s actually moving into 12s. Google Docs is fantastic. We've been sort of working on this where you can actually put all your notes in one um, place now, just using one tab. And you might get the kids, not one tab, sorry, one document, which can have multiple tabs. But
Mhm.
we can get the kids to really define each type of writing, where they have all their different examples. So, for example, persuasive writing requires students to have a clear thesis. They have evidence and text techniques. to support the idea, clear topic sentences to frame an argument. Whereas, in a discursive piece of text or writing, sorry, they're looking at exploration of ideas in a roundabout way, which presents balanced perspectives. And then when we're looking at imaginative writing, we're looking at exploiting this narrative ideas, and really exploiting the thematic concerns of whichever idea is presented in imaginative form, which has its own nuanced sort of styles, language that is associated with each respective part there. So again, the question here is, how do we support our students? You need to be exposing them to good quality forms of persuasive writing, discursive writing, imaginative writing, and really get them to ask the question like, why? Why is this good? So I guess that's the role of the teachers in your planning, is to really choose and select and be quite precise in the way you select your texts. I know sometimes, I will say this, sometimes we can look at some writing and some writers and just be mindful of what is relevant to students. I think that's very, very important. You can really choose like great texts, but if you don't have that student engagement with your cohort, doesn't matter how good the text is. You really need them to connect with it. As much as I find this now, as I'm getting a little bit older now and the grey hairs are starting to stick out, some of the texts that I like and I think are great may not resonate with my cohort. So this is where, we say have a diverse range of texts that you will look at, where you might, put together, here's a good way of probably doing it. If you've got a English faculty of, let's say, 4, 5, 6, 7, even bigger faculties out there, all varying from different experience, different age groups as well. As we know, it's a very diverse space now. You might go out and say, hey, to your faculty, come back with 5 respective texts from each of these different styles that you think will be relevant to your sort of time. And then you can put together that as a list, put that together as a list, and, keep the program quite general in nature. When I say general, still have like the skills that you want to be espousing, but then each year when it comes to it, you might do your text specific to your year group. It could be something like that, where you put together something, but at least now you've got diversity according to the different range of perspectives in your own faculty.
It's great,
will get
great
kids
differentiation.
Yeah, that might be something that you might consider. But yeah, there's a few things that I would consider in supporting these different writing styles. And then you can't underscore the sort of, I guess the big thing in the room here is the practice, practice, practice. You got to get kids to write constantly. Every single lesson, they must have their pen in hand, they're writing. Put their laptops away. I said this to my year 11s going into year 12 now. I said, in class, I just want your pen and paper, your books, so that you're actively writing. And then when you go home, pop everything onto your Google Doc that you've created. So all your notes. So not only are you consolidating everything you've learned in that lesson, there is a level of responsibility for students to practice writing. It'll get them to get that muscle memory going, but also it gets them to consolidate everything they've learned in that lesson. So if they haven't written anything in their books, then the responsibility will fall on them to actually get their butt into gear and really start to establish practices that will help them come HSC.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then the more they get into the writing, their confidence will grow. And I remember having a certain cohort, one student, I don't know, they were randomly sifting through their book and they happened to find some stuff that they wrote in year 11. They were now in year 12. And even they were like, oh my God, my writing is so much better now. I'm almost like, I don't even want to look at what I wrote 3, 4, 5 months ago, because the difference is palpable. But you're absolutely right. They're not going to get there unless they're absolutely writing. And I know a lot of teachers in this course, in this unit, it works perfectly for this rubric. They'll write alongside their students. So they might have a little creative writing activity or a little persuasive writing activity, and then timer 10 minutes. And then they'll actually spend a good 5 minutes sharing. They'll have some students share. The teacher will share what they come up with. And I think that's so beautiful in building that connection and being a team. And then the students will know, I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do. And that's powerful. That's as powerful as, well, I'm writing it down and I'm doing it, so therefore you have to as well. I think it just creates nice harmony in a classroom, and they get that sense of this is an ongoing thing that we're working on. That's fabulous. All right. We might move on to then our last question that I want to ask you for this, Adriel, is now what are some practical ways and some tips on how we might go about building our students' confidence within this topic and in the first term of year 11?
I think few things. Establish your expectation in the classroom. So what are those clear goals that students want to be doing in terms of their whole HSC journey for English? And reading to write really gives you that foundation that establish that. So get them to write it down. As you said, as kids look back through their books later on, if they've got it at the front of their book, like, okay, have I achieved my goal at the end of each term? Or, come year 12 at the end of year 12, have they achieved improving expression, improving the understanding of different forms, features, language, respective of different mediums. So really establish those goals. Establish an atmosphere in your classroom of proper discourse and dialogue. I'm going to say that as a key thing for all teachers to understand. You do not want, I can be guilty of this sometimes, where it's like kids will just look to you for the answers all the time. Really, really have open discourse, dialogue, and have the opportunity for students from varied perspectives to voice themselves in an open and free environment. That's very, very important. I'm going to say this as a teacher. You may not agree with everything a student might be saying, but you need to give them that space to think, because if you shut that down straight away, you are pigeonholing that student, and they will shut down, and then you're going to have a tough time actually trying to get things out for them. And honestly, it's because we have really done that to that student. So really establish this idea where you want people to be able to share freely. We are not a state who is censoring everything. We want to be a good democratic classroom where all voices are equal. And I think that's very, very important for teachers to consider, because people have different perspectives on different sort of text types, and you really want kids to think openly. And if you want to encourage that constructive dialogue and discourse, you cannot be shutting that down when it comes to thoughts on a text. Because if you do, this is what's going to happen. You'll read through a text and you'll tell like, oh, what do you guys think about this? And they'll all be that hesitant sort of look, because they're wondering, oh, what's my teacher going to be saying about my thought process here? We can guide students,
and then they're just
afterwards.
going to be. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
No, I think, what you said is so powerful, because then what happens is when they don't have those thoughts of their own, they just parrot whatever we said. And then we get frustrated when the responses are all the same on all the same ideas. And it is important to foster that critical thinking, which they need now more than ever. Like, we think about how passive they are when they consume content around them. The English classroom is the perfect space for us to try and counter that in the way that we can.
Yeah. I think it's very important for us to really, really get them to think critically. That's one of the big things in the reading to write unit, and even moving forward into any of those modules in the HSC course. So really have that open space there for students as an environment where everyone can think freely, no matter what the thoughts may be. It's very, very important. I also like what you mentioned just prior in our last question. This is so powerful when you as a teacher write alongside students. You not only, like, I can't underscore the importance of that, because they see you writing at the same time. It helps you as a teacher refine your skills as well. Because sometimes we'll just sit there, we'll be waiting, we'll be twiddling our thumbs. Use that time constructively. Write on the board as the students are writing, so they have no excuses to produce only one sentence or two sentences. Get them to show. So if that means you need to touch up on some skills at home, I highly encourage you guys to do that. Or if you aren't comfortable,
I still do that.
If you're not comfortable to write on the spot, do your prior plan, like in your organization for your lesson. Yeah, that's right. Have your notes with you. Some key notes. You're going to be asking this question. Well, there's no reason why you can't prepare it beforehand and then write it.
Yeah,
Write it with the kids.
100%.
Like
Yeah.
that's so powerful. It gives them no excuses then to not be writing because you're writing at the same time. I know sometimes we can fall into the trap of like death by PowerPoint, where we might just say, here's the next slide, copy this down, copy this down, copy this down. But I think it's important for us teachers to actually, use the power of your ability to write on the board. I know I've been having this joke with one of my colleagues currently where we've been preparing the kids for the HSC, and we joke a little bit about, our whiteboard writing skills in preparing the kids for their responses, because it's like the kids will parrot and mimic good writing at the end of the day as well. But if they can see your writing as a teacher, it's going to give them confidence. And this is the premise of this question. How do you build confidence? They see that their teacher is invested just as they are in the writing process, then it's going to be so beneficial for them. But yeah, there's so many different things that we can look at. I think fostering an environment which really enables voices to be heard and writing alongside them, they're probably the two key things for student confidence, and building good routines and practices. I think it takes 60 days to develop a good habit. They can spend that first term developing good habits. It'll make life so much easier going into year 12, using the prelim as a stepping stone into the HSC course.
Yeah, that's fabulous. You've offered so much great information, Adriel. And, if we have listeners who are still trying to differentiate between the text types or think of strategies to teach those text types, we have a lot of episodes that we've done earlier on persuasive writing, creative writing, strategies sections. So please do have a listen, because we've got a lot more strategies in broken down more depth and detail. And there's no reason why you can't refer to your students to have a listen to that episode. All our episodes go on YouTube as well, so you can also find a clip or something off of YouTube if you like to have that visual where we kind of break down that text type. So just making sure you guys are all knowing that these are what we're producing here is a resource that you absolutely can use to save you time and help you structure your lessons better. So you guys are doing really great work. We know how busy everyone is trying to make the adjustments now for the new syllabus, doing everything that you can. We're going to be in about a week or so releasing some content that we've created that we hope you guys will enjoy and find helpful. So keep an eye out for that. But you've done well. Make sure you take the last few days of the school holidays as a bit of a break and breather, and so you can recover and get into your next group of Year 12 students for most of you, or kind of getting in the end of the school year and consolidating things for the rest of your classes. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye.